Right, here we go. This is the one. After ages of setting up, I think I'm here. And if not, I'll have to fix it in post. So I tried live streaming last night and didn't go so well. Kind of got it going, but not great. A lot of technical issues. But we're here now. And I wanted the stream to be a little better. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to record this beforehand and I'm going to premiere it out and I'll be in the chat. So this is basically like a 3-year anniversary Q&A. I think someone asked me about it in the Patreon lounge. More information about that somewhere over there. But yeah, they asked me to do one, so I'm doing one. So I have a little pile of questions, I'll go through them, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. So the first question I've got here is, what compelled you to start making videos? Did you just go to animation school? And yes and no. I mean, I went to university for illustration, BA in illustration. I did a lot of mixed media stuff, a lot of collage and textural things, experimental stuff. I was really into the idea of becoming like a music artist, I guess, like someone who does the covers, book covers, that sort of thing. And there was a bit more there too. Like I started falling more into animation, which I had a mild background in from college, but I'd always found animation to be painful and a struggle, which it still is. But I seem to always fall back to it somehow. So we just kept doing this cycle. My final project was in animation. It was like an experimental music video. I think it's still on this channel. But that's kind of the direction I was going in, but it's not a really wide industry, to be honest. At least as far as I could find out. Like, I wasn't doing too well that side. So making videos was actually something I was interested in from that start, especially about music. That was actually the go-to. I think I wrote that Ryo Fukui video a lot earlier than many of the scripts, but it didn't get made until I had like the proper tech down. I needed some extra stuff, basically. And I think that was a video that really showed like what my conception for the channel was originally, which is taking my skills in collage and multimedia and animation and stuff about passion about history, music, and turning that into a video project. The way I got into anime was actually because I was having a really hard time writing another series, which is probably never going to get made now, which was about the musician Prince, because copyright would just be too much of a nightmare with it. But I did want to do like an artist retrospective, and it would be really long and artsy, and I'd do a lot of collage and animation-y bits and make it stand out and talk. But I was, let's just say I was not the best writer, and I still don't consider myself much of a writer. It's secondary to what I do. It's been a lot easier after 3 years of doing it. You kind of get into the swing of it, but still not ideal. So I was making this series, I was trying to write it out, and I literally just couldn't write it. At the same time, I was working at a university, and I went to the library there, and they had like an anime section, and they had some really old anime in that section. And I got out a copy of Horus Prince of the Sun, or Holes Prince of the Sun, whatever you want to call it. And when I got that, I watched it, and I was kind of shocked. Now, this wasn't the first time I'd been shocked by like an early anime. I think that first one, probably like 1001 Nights by Tezuka and his company, and the following succession of Anime films, which we'll get to a little bit later. But yeah, I'd watched it and I was just kind of shocked about how little it was talked about. I think I'd first seen it on like a BFI like list of animation films, like, you know, the animation films of the century or something like that. And yeah, the scene with the fish and just watching the whole thing, I was just like, this is just Ghibli, but 20 years before. And nobody I'd heard of at the time who was talking about this stuff had mentioned it at all. And all the sources I found about it, you know, they were 10, 15 years old, and, you know, easily they could just fall into obscurity. Those links could die tomorrow. And I think in some part that like really bothered me, like emotionally. As someone who's like very archivist, I'm always thinking that way, like, who's going to tell this story? Who's going to tell the younger generations that this is a thing that happened? And it is mentioned briefly in the 2013 documentary, was it Dreams and Madness, about their origins, but they really don't go into it very much about like all the technical parts of it, especially who did it, how Toei got started, which sort of became part of my channel, I guess. Like Toei's history and the history of animation, it became very important to that. So yeah, I started writing that video just because I couldn't write my other video. Basically, that's how it went. I wrote the video. I I was applying at the time for some sort of critic day. It was kind of like a little press thing. One of my friends was running on it as well. So they were like, you got to give an example of like your critic work. And I was writing this video, and the deadline was like 24 hours after I'd started editing it. I had 20, 30 hours to edit this video, and I was pretty rusty. I was using stuff that I'd found on the internet for free. I was really rusty on editing videos, hadn't done it in a long time. This channel does actually go back a while. When I was younger, let's say about 10 years younger, 10, 11 years younger, I made a couple video game reviews, which I think I deleted, which for shame, I should have never deleted them. But they were something, I will say that much. But like, I had learned a lot about video editing back then while doing those and doing other little projects and stuff along the years. So it was there, I was just very rusty. So I just spent the whole night editing this video. I put it out, I gave it to this company, and what do you know, they actually let me in for the day. I tricked them. I'm now a critic. At the time, I was like full art bro. So that was a surprise for me. Really fun day, really nice time, and I had to make another video. And because I had to make another video, things just went that way. I kept making stuff, kept making those videos. Some of them did surprisingly well for the time. Like all the first videos I did, they started growing at like a decent rate for what I was expecting. And yeah, that's how I got started, I guess. I wanted to make videos about music, and I still do, though the animation has become unintentional part. Because technically I'm an animator. I'm not a very good one, but I would consider myself animation, and the history is really important to me. So usually what happens is I'll be compelled by the very idea of like, who else is going to tell this story? If no one else is going to say what I'm seeing in front of me, I almost feel compelled to do it myself. So yeah, in a roundabout way, that is the story. So next question. What do you think would happen if Japan went bankrupt and they just stopped making anime? Bit of a weird question, but I thought I'd add it in just because someone asked. Right, I don't think it's really as simple as like Japan going bankrupt. I'd use, alright, let's say modern example. There's a virus going around and anime becomes very difficult to make because of social distancing and people getting infected, and you can't go to work, and the voice actors and the production people can't get into the office. And there's like a collapse of the economy, and all these companies are going under because they don't make any money. All the money they make is very splintered into all these different directions. Yeah, we might see some very awkward stuff happen. I think it would be terrible for Japan because Japan loves the ability to have soft power. I mean, that's why they created the Cool Japan project, right? So when you're talking about animation in Japan, I almost feel like they don't do enough to support them, like from a government perspective, because it is such a important outsource for the country, and it's only gotten bigger as the years have went on, and the struggles of the industry have only started to get more hazardous. Like, they're just strained. And something like the pandemic is almost brings a hole to the whole industry in general, because it's not just the animation industry that has these issues. So realistically, if those were to happen, I would hope that maybe the government would step in with some sort of plan, like maybe housing for animators, maybe bringing a budget like the NHK, the public broadcasting, having them publicly fund more anime. And I think they do fund some, to be fair, but yeah, just generally subsidizing the industry, and maybe creating more legislation to make it a better place to work and more encouraging for people to actually join and not leave after 3 years because they can't cut it, because they can't pay their bills. And yeah, I mean, Japan went bankrupt before it happened. The bubble burst, anime didn't disappear. The quality obviously sort of dipped because there wasn't people throwing huge amounts of money into it and time for people to make those anime. So there was an issue there, but realistically, I think anime's done pretty alright since then. Will you cover more? This is the third question, by the way. Will you cover more non-anime animation? This might happen. I never really intended the channel to cover those sort of topics, but early days I was kind of just doing whatever I wanted, and I'd still do that, which is probably why, you know, hit and miss is. YouTube encourages you to follow one path, and I'm just not like that. So even though when I've had these massive success videos, I have done a very terrible job of following up and keeping that consistent success, which I'll probably try and do a bit more of that, to be honest, as it comes through. Like, I know the paths I have now. But yeah, there is actually a couple that I would like to cover. Like King and the Mockingbird, when I covered that, it was originally just because my research led me there. Like, the research for the first 3 videos was kind of all connected, because it was just the same stream of thought. Like, you had this one film, which was Horus, and then you had the film that sort of began some of the origins of its characters, and the people who were making it, which was Little Prince and the Eight-Headed Dragon. And then after that, the influence of these several figures in their films was King of the Mockingbird, from the 50s version in Japan. So it was just this stream, and then the story of King Mockingbird was just so fascinating on its own that I felt it had to be told, because, yeah, I didn't think anyone else was going to do it. And that video did surprisingly well, better than the other 2. I never thought that would happen, if I'm honest, because it's far more obscure than the other 2. In fact, I'd heard about this film when I was in university, because they were playing it, and I was a fool and I didn't go see it, because my friend mentioned it in passing, like, oh, they're playing this old French animated film at the local cinema at the time, and I'm like, yeah, I guess that sounds cool, but whatever. So I didn't go to see it, and I missed out on, like, a fantastic film, because, you know, shrug. But yeah, there's a couple more I'd like to cover. Some Soviet animation. I think his name is it Yuji Lewent? I don't want to say his name, but he created the Hedgehog, like the Hedgehog and the Fog. He has a film that he's been making for like a bajillion years, and it's still not finished, and he's still working on it. And considering I kind of have like a trilogy, or it would be a trilogy if I made this one, a film about unfinished animated pieces that never get done, or they get done much later, or they take decades to do. If I could somehow get in contact, if I could actually figure out if he's actually gonna release it, or if there's gonna be some form of it, I think he's shown it about. That would be such an interesting video to make, I think. And the other one would be Moebius's film. Moebius, incredibly influential to the Japanese culture, and generally animation in general, and comics, and he was just a very influential artist, maybe one of the most influential of the 20th century. Miyazaki was a fan, that's probably my through line, but he made an animated film at one point called Time Strangers, and he was involved in that. I think he was involved in a couple others, but that's one that he was like very closely involved in, and it's kind of weird and unique, and I could totally do a video about that and just follow the through line and see where it goes. That could be interesting. I think there's another one, Hungarian animation or something like that. Could happen. Like, yeah, if I find something that's really weird and I'd like to talk about it, at some point I might talk about it. That's the blunt of it, really. If I don't think anyone else is going to do the job that I want to do, then I will talk about it. Do I have a mal? I get this one a couple of times. I do, but it's dead. However, I've been talking to some people and I've been thinking about it. If I can get the live streaming actually going, kind of did last night. Maybe it would be easier if it was screen share, and I think I've figured out maybe the mic problems. But if it was screen share, I might just sit down, screen share, and just go through people, and then just go through Mal for like an hour, and click all the stuff I've watched since. The ratings I've got on there are useless. I don't even know if I'm going to re-rate things. I might just spend an hour removing them. But I will just go from like 1960 and just add everything that I've watched since in some form. And just do that as a live stream because, why not? Someone asked me. So yeah, I'll bring it back. I'll update it, and then maybe I'll post it somewhere. Alright, this is a question from Sen Huxtable. Shout out to Sen Huxtable. Great channel, great artist, great musician. Alright, how prevalent is animation as a practice in your life? Do you have intentions of incorporating it into your work? In what capacity do you animate these days? Great question, because it's something I actually think about quite a lot, especially lately since I've been watching The Minute Hour, I think it's called. There's sort of a part of me that has always wanted to be like a weird experimental creep out black absurd. absurdist animator who does stuff like the Minute Hour or videos like, oh god, who did that video? I'm trying to think of. I've lost the name now, but there are just weird videos out there. One of
Hey, I need some air. Point that air at me.
but yeah, I've tried to incorporate more animation in my work, especially of late. When I do the music videos, I always try and incorporate some animation and some sort of my creative output. On the day-to-day, like I do a little bit, but like it usually is to do with the videos, just because I don't have time to start randomly animating on my own. But lately I bought a Lightbox, so that's why there's been a lot more like casual animation in my videos, because I think they bring something more interesting to the videos, a little more personality. The new video I'm doing, there might be a little bit in. The last 2 videos I've done, there's been some. Just anything like that. Alright, we had some technical issues there. I think I'm back for good. We're about to find out. So, where were we? Alright. What is a good example of a political anime? And I think the question was however you interpret that. There was really only one answer I could think of at the time, which was Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Like, I don't think there's anything else you could call that show but, like, a very long-winded social-economic, political sci-fi story, which covers a lot of ground. Because, most anime made for, like, 14-year-olds, so, like, political discourse or actual talking about political ideas is sort of more in the background. It's like there isn't literal governments to be dealt with. Like, I guess you can kind of see that with like the difference between like Legend of the Galactic Heroes and Code Geass, and how they one really hypes up the spectacle more than it does the political conflict, and there's elements there. Oh, I suppose as well, Gundam. Gundam's definitely a political show, definitely some stuff in there. Pretty much all of Gundam, all the shows, to some extent, have a political dichotomy within them. So yeah, I think those 2, pretty good, obvious choices for myself. Right. Is there anything produced recently that has the energy and style of the late 70s, 80s era of anime? I thought this was a peculiar question, because I mean, if you want that style, if you want that energy, you might as well just go and watch them. You might as well just go watch something from the late 70s, the early 80s, the OVA era. Like, it would be much easier, and I can guarantee you haven't watched everything. Like, there's a lot of shows. Like, you probably haven't seen it all. If I was to give an example of something which I thought had like that spirit or that energy, or was intending to have that sort of spirit from prior decades, I wrote down, what's it called, Megalobox? The robot version of Ashita no Joe. Or Ashita no Joe. I mean, I'd honestly rather you just watch Ashita no Joe, but if you want to watch something new, I think that's, like, they're obviously going for it. I think they pull it off by the looks of it. Other stuff, I don't know, man. I don't keep up long enough, but I think the spirit of 70s and 80s anime is very much part of the culture at this point, and many of its stars have been like embedded in. I mean, if you look at Trigger, like Trigger is definitely pretty much everything they put out has like those homages to that original 70s and 80s block, including like, what was their newest show? I don't remember the name, but that definitely has a style of yesteryear within it. So yeah. Alright, let's see what we got here. Here's one about music. Favorite albums or music? I think this is a really long, large question, so I don't really have like a very specific answer, because I was never like the person who was on just one thing for most of my life. It varies. Like, I'm a bit of a musical nomad, especially my later years, last 3, 4 years, 5 years. Very much all over the place. Nothing I would consider like favorite. But going through it, like when I was really young, I didn't listen to much music. I was pretty much listening to what my parents would have. There was a lot of Queen, Michael Jackson, and the Beatles. Like those three, I think would have been a major part. When I got a bit older, probably my teenage years, I listened to a lot of Beatles, like a lot of the deep cuts, a lot of 60s stuff. I sort of moved my way through. Got to a certain age, I started listening to a lot of Radiohead. Very stereotypical, I know, but such is the case when you're a white suburban boy, who's depressed. But yeah, listened to them for many years. Still a fan. Went to see them live. Probably the band that I hold like the most investment in through my life, I think, would have been them. And going forward, it's pretty much all over the place. I'd say Death Grips is probably the band I've listened to like the most in the last couple of years. I've listened to The Thing. I was very invested in the narrative of the band. Lots of interesting stuff there. The way they make music videos, all that stuff really interested. The aesthetic resonated with how I made stuff. Definitely. If I ever got to make a music video, that would be like my like golden opportunity band. And I did actually once have an idea of making like a whole retrospective, like a whole video, like on the whole thing, like a documentary on 10 years of Death Grips. If I do it or not, who knows? It's almost a little too ambitious, but yeah, never say never. But yeah, when it comes to Japanese bands, I'd say like Boris, Ringo Shiina, and who's the other one? Midori. I think those three are pretty big, but there's a lot of Japanese music I listen to. Right, next question is about, I think it was favorite non-anime animes, or like favorite animations or anime of all time. And again, I'm not huge on all-time lists. I kind of just do a lot of watching of everything. But I'll give a couple of ones that I think were important to me at different times of my life, or ones that I've watched a lot. Starting with non-anime, Yellow Submarine. You know, if it isn't obvious, like some of the collage scenes in the early Yellow Submarine, I watched that a lot on VHS back when I was younger. Very interested in the style, the weird sort of surreality of it all, the mixture of the music. Very cool. World of Tomorrow. This one's pretty obscure. I think it's Don Hernsoff. Don Hernsoff. I'm not sure how to say his name. I don't know how to say anyone's name apparently. But yeah, he made these shorts. He's spent his whole life making like strange shorts. He made this one called World of Tomorrow, which is like a sci-fi story. Very strange mixed media. Has his little stick figure. Has these little like sci-fi stories within it. But like aesthetically, the way it worked, the way he was doing stuff in that video, and he'd done a couple beforehand that I've seen, but I think World of Tomorrow is the one that really like hit me personally as something that like inspired my third year project. I think he's made a sequel since, like a part 2 of it, which I should probably check down. I like rented the original on Vimeo, but like his whole career, really interesting, and the stuff he's been doing, like to mix mediums, going digital, the way he's like applied it to his practice and style, like a glitchy cybernetic sort of uncomfort. Yeah, I'm into it. I mentioned it earlier, The King and the Mockingbird. I believe it had a different name when it was its early version. There's like a 50s version, 80s version. I'm probably more smitten with the 80s version because of reasons I put up in my video. Really unique 50s animation. Maybe not like the most amazing technical animation. It's still very fluent, but like it's very surreal. It's liquid. It's not necessarily a lot of emphasis in the animation. Everyone sort of moves like they're a ragdoll, I guess. But still, like, fascinating themes, fascinating part of the time, imagery, all great. Where it comes from, wonderful. Roger Rabbit. Yeah, so, again, someone else I've mentioned on the channel before. And rest in peace. But, yeah, the animation in Roger Rabbit, that's probably my favourite Disney, I reckon. It's been a while since I've watched it, but just, like, the mixture of everything that they did, the darker tone, the noir aspect, I was a big noir boy. all of that comes together great. Like, I don't think any film has like had their technical mastery of Roger Rabbit since, especially when it came to live action and animation coming together. Just not a thing really. Fantastic Planet, the French film Fantastic Planet, really out there, really weird and unique. A lot of style to it. It may not be like the most animated film, but like, yeah, it just has a real unique vibe to it. Incredibly influential. I think everyone should watch it just because it's just so out, so unique as a project. And he also had a part in I believe the creator of it also had a part in Time Strangers. I hope it's actually called Time Strangers now because I've actually forgotten. Time Masters, something like that, like the French film. But yeah, very good. I remember reading a review from Miyazaki from like, it's in his book. He watched the film, and I think he seemed very like perplexed and like he didn't get it. But afterwards, there seems to be that he had some sort of admiration to the film. Maybe it was like a slow burn on him. Like, he slowly became more like interested in the film, or it left more of a mark on him, because there are references in Nausicaa, like there are like actual references artistically, which you usually don't do as a creator unless you have some admiration for the thing you're referencing. So yeah, there's that. Obviously the guy and Isao especially, like both of them, very interested in like French culture, especially Isao. So I imagine it probably grew on him over the years. Do I have any others? All right. So the other ones here were just like a couple Japanese ones. I threw in the Japanese ones just to give you five. You know, Angel's Egg, Neo Tokyo, Metropolis, My Name of the Yamadas, and Belladonna of Sadness. Going through that, My Name of the Yamadas. That's probably the Ghibli film I think deserves more credit for what it's due. Kind of went completely bust. Very comfy. I think there's something about it like in some ways, Takahata, to me, always seemed like he was a better comedian. Like, he can do comedy very well, but he sort of got lumped into being, like, quite a serious, like, poetic director because of works like Grave. Yeah, stylistically, even though if it ruined the studio to some degree, like, completely bombed, completely threw the book out of the wall, like, the ceiling, made it almost impossible for him to make a new film until he was forced to. Yeah, dynamic, crazy story. Even though it's very casual. It's a very casual watch, but still, nonetheless, worthwhile. I've already made a video about Metropolis. What do you want me to say there? I watched it when I was probably 10 years younger, I guess. 10, 13 years younger. Visually, striking, amazing. Story-wise, I think there's more there than people give it credit. And music, very great. I think that really stuck with me. Yeah, just a great film. More people should see it. Angel's Egg, very similar situation. I was talking about that last night in the testing stream. Great film, great mood piece, great like nightmarish sort of construction of whatever it is to the reader. A lot of ways you can read it. Probably some of the best art house in the anime world, and I think it put Oshii on the map, critically maybe. I mean, maybe now I guess, but definitely not for the money. Toshio Suzuki actually produced that one, so I'll give him the credit there. Like, Toshio Suzuki has kept like some of Oshii's most interesting and abstract works like alive. Even though I imagine he assumed that they probably wouldn't actually make their money back maybe in the long run, but not when they first released. Yeah, already talked about Neo Tokyo. Great piece. I can't remember the Japanese name for it, to be honest. Labyrinth Story, is it? Labyrinth Tales. Great mix of artists, great little shorts. As you can tell, I'm a bit of an art house boy myself, and that's when you get to Belladonna of Sadness. Belladonna of Sadness, I've watched this one several times. I own it now on Blu-ray. I own like the collector's edition. It's something I always wanted to make a video about. I think on my first video I mentioned like, oh yeah, Anirama Trilogy. That's something I'm going to talk about. 3 years later, haven't talked about it. Eventually it will happen. Who knows when, but eventually I'm hoping to do it. Belladonna is probably my favourite of the three, even though I think the first one I saw had like the biggest impact on me. I saw Belladonna originally. Terrible fan sub, really poor quality image found on the internet somewhere. Maybe it was a VHS burn or something. Hard to make sense of the story because the sub was not good at all. Watched it in the cinema. Yeah, I actually got to see this one. I saw this in a small independent cinema. Absolutely great. I think everyone was having a great time because like they were just laughing the whole time, and I think they were really into it. Not necessarily a comedic film, but it is so camp, and I think people were just like on the ride for it. But yeah, what a great visual spectacle. Got me into the watercolors again at the time. I was big into watercolors when I was doing it. All my sketchbooks were just like watercolor imagery. I was not into like fixing something down unless it was in biro. Yeah, wonderful soundtrack, wonderful story, incredibly influential on Madhouse. If you've ever noticed some of the early work, definitely you can see the influence there. I think you can see the influence for the whole industry when it comes to anything. So like anything shoujo, definitely worth checking out. All right, what we got here? Next one. Will you cover more Japanese music in the future? Of course. The Nujabes video, very big. Since then, I've made one more video, I think. Nujabes, I got ill while making that. Like, it was like literally 6 months of my life, with like 3 months really condensed down at the end to actually doing it. And there was like a loose period at the beginning where I was like doing the research, doing the reading, and just trying to figure out what I was doing, trying to find translations, trying to find interviews, like a lot of like the grunt work. And yeah, it was an experience. It took a long time. I think it was worth it to some degree, though. It's the first time I used this mic, and I didn't know how to set it up, and the audio sounds like shit. And Forever Day, basically forever, like that video to me, like while being like one where I put the most emotional like baggage on it, I guess, because of how long it took, how long it was as a project, and spent just so frustrating to make, and finally like getting it. But like the sound quality will always like be that thing that makes me turn in my grave. I even considered like recording the whole thing, just like re-releasing it again and be like, no, this is it with good audio, but I don't know if I can be bothered. Oh yeah, I think I forgot to write this one down, but there was a question about like how do I like prepare for like a big video? And yeah, generally it takes a lot of time. Like a lot of the ideas I have for videos, like they usually come months, years beforehand, and like I start doing like initial stuff. Like a lot of it is research. Like you got to start with your research. I don't tend to make like I don't have a path in mind before I've done the research to some degree, unless there's something that really sparks me. And totally, like, it usually begins looking for tons of interviews, looking for books on the matters, looking over the internet, like, yeah, internet interviews, books, and then I will try and find some journals if possible, because usually that can give you a different perspective on it. Like, just anything, blogs, any blog I could find that has interesting points or has to talk about it. There's just, yeah, all that. A lot of it will then be going through what I'm talking about. If that's just like spending a long time with the music or the projects themselves, and just watching them and making notes and re-listening and re-watching. It depends who I'm talking about. And at some point you might get like a through line. Like I might start structuring like ideas like, okay, this is like the direction of the story I want to tell him. This is like the trajectory of the band. This is like the things I'm seeing that's the same. And then like I might start writing an outline. These days I start writing outlines on paper because I'm terrible on the computer. Far too distracted when I'm on there. So like I sometimes will write notes on the computer like very quickly if I'm not thinking too much, but I prefer to start writing my first base on paper if I can, just because it will mean I'm less distracted when I'm writing it, and I can write faster than I can type. Eventually it will get on the computer, and then maybe I'll print it out again and look through it. And then there's like storyboarding it and timing, and like sometimes, well, if it's a really big video, I might have to storyboard certain stuff if it's like completely out of the bounds of like using media. Like there was a storyboard for like the Ryo Fukui video, just because there was like so much, like so many like different photoshops and so many different little parts in it. So yeah, it's a slog. Let's put it that way. And God, what was it? Yeah, the Japanese one. Yeah, totally more Japanese on the way. Speaking of which, there actually should be a Vocaloid. I think that's the next one I want to do, was Vocaloid. Things would change now because of like the whole epidemic. Like originally I was hoping like, Coachella would happen, and Miku Hatsune Miku, she was supposed to be at Coachella, and I thought that would be like a really interesting like starting off point for that, and just going through the history of like Vocaloids, because it's very I find it like, if you're an outsider, like Vocaloids probably don't make any sense to you. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily an outsider to Vocaloids, but I think I understand that perspective. And to me, it's sort of a case of like, where is the appeal of Vocaloids? Where is the history? How did this become such a sensation? Where's it going? And yeah, I have a friend who's actually really into it. She's a big fan, and she has like a very different perspective, and I think it would be good to marry those two, where it's like going through the through lines, and then also talking to someone who's been like legitimately a fan for over 10, maybe 15 years, and getting their perspective and trying to marry those two different worlds together. I had no idea how long it's gonna take though, but we'll see. Oh yeah, and when it comes to Japanese music, there was another project I would have liked to do. Maybe I can still do it. Maybe I can set up like I'm here and just do it. But I want to do it at a friend's house and just sort of just go off and talk about small weird Japanese music. Like just sit down like in a vlog style like this and just go for it and just talk about the stuff that I think will take too long to make a video. And just do that like on a bi-weekly or weekly basis, and just really like crack down on talking about more music, because the big projects are just so overwhelming, and like if they don't do well, it's like crushing. So like just having a more casual version of that where I can be a bit more experimental and then see what works, I think would be a really good idea. And then I can just go for it, and I think it will give me like a consistent content, which I think is something my channel has always missed, is having like a content that I can just sort of do and put out and not worry about it too much, and just have some fun with it. Make them mostly unscripted, just like partially scripted, sitting down, do a little bit of creative editing, a little bit of experimenting, maybe a little bit of art, and put them out. Simple as that. Now here's a big one. All right. I loved your Madhouse month, particularly when you talk about like the technical aspects of animation, and I was wondering if you were interested in doing more of them on places like Sunrise or Toei or other studios. Now I mentioned to the person I've already done Toei month. I've done that in the past. Would I do another Toei month? The reason I chose Madhouse instead of Toei again is that like as Toei goes on, the projects they start making as movies are mainly just manga adaptations, instead of like the unique, interesting things they were doing before. Even if they weren't good, like there was a lot of like intent behind all of that stuff. Like Yotaro, the Dragon Boys, and Holes, they all have like a history where I don't know if I want to like review 15 Dragon Ball films and 17 Sailor Moons and whatever else, because the unique ones become a lot less frequent. So yeah, I thought Madhouse would make a better sequel. Something like Sunrise. Again, Sunrise is like huge on TV shows. TV shows takes a lot of time. Sunrise shows are like 50 episodes. It's going to be maybe a little bit too much to do. If there was one I was going to do, it would be Sanrio, because Sanrio have like such a selection of strange movies that they made for kids, and like they are all really unique and almost a bit like subverted. And I think that history would be worth talking about. But yeah, never say never for anything else. It's always possible there could be more videos like that. I generally do them as almost like research binges, where like I get something out of them at the end, because usually I don't have enough time to like spend a whole month dedicated to just watching 30 films. Alright. Here's coming back full circle here. Will you cover 1001? I think I literally just mentioned it a minute ago. Hopefully, yes, one day. Yes. And here's another one. I've gotten several of these on the Takako Mamiya's like video. Has a lot of people been like, what about X mystery? What about this mystery? Like this person said like, have you heard of Judy Anton? She released 2 city pop albums and vanished. Similar to Takako. What about digging up info and making a video about it? Probably a hard no on like all of them, because like the mystery of Takako, like it was really frustrating to write because there's, even though people have been searching for like 10 years, there's so little on the story, like you can only put down those tangible details, and like no new leads are really coming from anywhere, which means like the video became more of like a shit post than it did actually 100% about like her history. Like there's there, but at the end of the day, like the mystery isn't like a mystery most of the time. It is literally just like one hit wonder sort of syndrome. Like they'll make a couple albums when like the genre is booming. They won't sell very much, and they will quit the industry, or they will find a different place in the industry. And it won't really be talked about in English, like speaking areas. So yeah, it looks like they vanish. Realistically, most of them probably just quit. Happens all the time. Not much else to say about it. But in my vloggy series, if there was a mystery where I found some like good leads or some interesting story behind it, could happen. And I think it'd be worth mentioning, because a lot of these are like, will you cover X? There is like a Patreon tier I do, which is like the highest one. If you're like really rearing for me to cover a topic and it's one that we can agree upon, usually I'm talking like music or animation, you can hit me up there if you've got that kind of cash. But yeah, like I get a lot of requests, let's say, and I'm only gonna do the ones usually that like I find a through line in. Because if I can't find a reason to be interested in it, then there's like no reason for me to make the video. And finally, the last question I've got here, unless I've forgotten one, who's your waifu? The community is my waifu. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for showing up. I hope you had a good time. And I'll catch you hopefully really soon. There should be like there should be a Ghibli video in the works. There should be a couple of them. Because like I've got nothing better to do than make a couple more Ghibli videos. I've been meaning to do it forever. So yeah, I think one is pretty much like the next couple of days should be out. Anyway, I'll see you then.